it took me, call it 2 years to really get comfortable in my shoes of being able to pitch this as a skill set. So it's been fun. No one's lining up behind me to try to learn this quite yet, which I'm thankful of because what that means to me is if you're buying land, your step one in your diligence process is call your water broker, which is me.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Big Picture Blueprint. Dan and Mason here today talking with a pretty exciting guest, at least exciting to us, because it's all about water, which if you do any business west of the Mississippi or something like that, west of maybe a little further west than that, but in the Western United States, you're going to need to know where your water is coming from when you're looking at land. But before getting into it, how's it going, Mason?
Things are good. Things are busy, and water is always top of mind with a lot of the projects that we do. Regardless of the laws, it's something to be concerned about when you're in the Western United States, which is why, I reached out to Sean at first, and now we have him on the show. So we're joined by Sean Flanagan, a seasoned real estate professional based in Colorado who's just made a big move to the water industry. Sean brings over a decade of experience spanning 17 states, more than $1 billion in capital deployment, and over 10 million square feet of development across multiple asset classes. And now Sean is a water broker, trading water whenever it can, and, brokering these deals, which have a lot of complexity, a tremendous amount of value, and very few people that know what they're talking about. So without further ado, let's bring Sean in. Sean Flanagan, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Mason, appreciate you having me. Dan, great to meet you. Happy Thursday, gents.
Yeah. We're glad to have you on the show. I think it will amount to almost free consulting for us because we don't know as much as we should about an area that you're an expert in, which is water. But before we, dive into our 45 minutes of free consulting and asking you a bunch of questions, Sean, why don't you tell the audience who you are, where you're from, and kind of how you got to where you are today in business?
Fair enough. Appreciate that. So I currently today sit in South Denver, very specifically North Douglas County, Colorado, and born and raised. I spent about a 10-year period sitting out in Chicago, working in a commercial real estate development firm, wearing every hat you could think of as part of the process. But I spent about 10 years with them learning the land side of the business, as well as development, which has been just a phenomenal ride. I would also tell you the development cycle right now is a bit rough, but the last side of the ride was great. About a few years ago, I came back to Colorado, and when I did, I jumped around to a couple different firms. I worked for a railroad for a year. I went and sat with a public REIT that was self-proclaimed to be the largest industrial REIT in the world. I'm just going to name drop them because it's kind of fun. Prologis. Good organization, but we parted ways. And when we did, I was trying to figure out a way to differentiate myself. And kind of the best way I can explain it is there are, by my estimates, about 10,000 real estate brokers licensed, whether you're residential or commercial or just land or farm and ranch, whatever, in the state of Colorado. And being one of 10,000 didn't really do it for me. I didn't want to be one of those guys in the crowd. And so I was trying to figure out a way to, stand out. And what I came up with was water. There was a couple different development projects over my career that had some water complexity to them. And at the time, I just thought, oh, it's another problem. Whatever. We'll figure it out. We'll solve it. We'll get through it. We'll tilt walls. We'll lease. We'll sell. It'll be great. We'll make money. When I was trying to figure out how to differentiate myself, I realized, well, I didn't know anything about the water side of the business. We had to go find somebody to help tell us. And it was that same story with every organization. Didn't matter whether I was with the $200 billion in assets under management organization or the $2 million in assets under management organization. Nobody understood water. And then when I dug into it, I didn't understand it. I had to hire those experts. So I kind of thought to myself, man, that's what I need to learn. That is how I'm going to differentiate myself. And so I spent a couple months cold calling a bunch of folks trying to figure out how to learn about the water industry. And I eventually found a brokerage firm. But before I did that, the short story is I found about 10 experts that understood water. Now, there are a million water rights attorneys that that's different. That's a legal position, and I don't have a law degree or I've not passed the bar, and that was not my plan to go back to law school by any means. So now I'm looking at it as, okay, I found a niche that 10 out of 10,000 know how to do. Okay, well, what is the business? How do I grow? How do I differentiate myself between those 10? And, who do I work for? What I found was that just digging in, doing the hard work, doing the research, reading the decrees, working on a couple engagements, that was the right path forward. And as far as differentiating myself from the other 10, there was no need. They are not going to be with us forever. What I found is that of those 10 water brokers, 7 of them are over the age of 80. So not to knock them, but literally they can't be here forever. They can't do this forever. They've got to hand over the reins. And water rights are so complex that there aren't a lot of people doing it. No one's knocking on the door to say, hey, let me struggle to figure out something hyper complex and be the unique rainbow or the one-off unicorn. So I jumped in, water pun. I jumped in all the way in. I joined Hydrosource Inc. They are a brokerage firm that was founded by a guy named Greg Campbell. He sat with Denver Water for 40 years. The other principal sits down in the Arkansas Basin, sits in Colorado Springs. He was the managing member of the Arkansas Basin that drafted that basin's portion of the Colorado Water Plan. So 2 guys that have spent decades in the water industry, later in their years, looking to retire, looking to teach, looking to pass on the company name and the trade. So I feel very fortunate that they were willing to accept my 7 phone calls, cold calls, until they finally answered on number 8. But or I should say they didn't answer the first 7, but I kept going. And it's been a wild ride. Today I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I have 11 active listings, buy side and sale side, water exclusive. I am also selling a golf course, which is wild and off topic, but if we want to go into the questions of who's your favorite client or who isn't your favorite client, we can figure that out later. But yeah, it's been a it's been a fun ride. It really started out very slow. Water is even slower than land, believe it or not. Even in the good times, the craziness is the way I would describe the market is a bilateral oligopoly. Does that make any sense to anybody? A bilateral oligopoly? It sounds horrible, right? It sounds like some sort of authoritarian regime. Well, it kind of is. That's the crazy part. I'm not bashing the water industry at all and just trying to be honest. What I mean by that is the market is extremely limited in buyers and sellers. And those buyers are typically municipalities in the end, or they're developers that have to dedicate the water to a municipality. So you can never get away from the municipal angle. But the other side of the equation is the ag industry, the industrial industry, the municipal industry. And essentially, being the middleman in a scenario where there's a limited number of buyers and sellers means I really don't have much influence. It's my job to kind of be a pest and present the opportunity and hope that they like it. They have so much control, and there's only a few of them. And yeah, it's a challenge, but it's so big that no one's doing it. And it took me, call it 2 years, to really get comfortable in my shoes of being able to pitch this as a skill set. So it's been fun. No one's lining up behind me to try to learn this quite yet, which I'm thankful of, because what that means to me is if you're buying land, your step 1 in your diligence process is call your water broker, which is me. So shameless plug here, Hydrosource Inc., Sean Flanagan. Call me if you find land with water, or call me if you find land without water. Either way, call me during diligence. That's what's important. Let me beat my head against the wall, figuring it all out. So that's the kind of fun. I mean, I'm sure there's some background and I skipped over some stuff, but it's been a fun ride so far.
I feel like you have, yeah, so many stories from, being railroad industry, like all sorts of stuff. But let's start a little higher level.
Okay.
What are water rights and what are the different types of water rights?
Ooh, great question. So water rights are property rights. And the nuance there is depending upon where you are within the US, you can either sever your water rights from the land or they run with the land. And it's a state by state scenario. Um, Similar to oil and gas rights, similar to mineral rights. You can own mineral rights without owning any real property rights or any real land. I mean, yes, you may have a surface right agreement to be able to go drive down the street and go to your oil well and, grab your barrel. That was a super oversimplification, but in essence, water rights are property rights, no different than physical land or oil and gas, or the air above your ground. In Colorado, which is where I practice, it is a case of first in time, first in right, or prior appropriation is the technical term. That might be Latin. I should probably figure that out. Um, but what that means is essentially whoever used the water first has the right to own it, technically. I'm going to say technically a whole bunch because it's a wild mixed bag of technicallys in water rights. But essentially what that means is, let's say it's 1700, you've got your, Oregon Trail wagon, you're cruising across the West and you plant your flag in Colorado and you start farming. Well, Colorado, especially on the eastern side of the slope, doesn't have a lot of water. So you got to figure out how to get water on your land. Well, what did you do? You dug a ditch. And that ditch diverted water off of a stream. That was the first use of water within the US. And it actually goes back to a Spanish land grant, but we'll save some of that history for another day. Essentially, the first person to use that right in a beneficial way, that water, they're the ones that have the right to own it. The other nuance here, which is why I keep saying technically, is water rights can't be owned by individuals. Technically, they are a right of the people, of the public, per Colorado. And the rationale behind that was an anti-speculation strategy. The government and the state basically said, well, we don't want corporations and, the Carnegies, the billionaires of the world from buying all of the water rights and hoarding them and essentially controlling everything. We want water to be owned by the people. So there's this concept of anti-speculation as well, meaning that you and I, Mason, as individuals, or even with our LLCs, we can't go and just buy water to hold it, knowing that water is going to increase in value, similar to land if you hold it for the long run. Yes, there are ways to buy water rights and avoid the speculation mudslinging. But in essence, all water in Colorado is owned by the people. So it's a technical mixed bag of fun. But the other side of your question is, so what is water? It is a property right, one of your bundles of rights. Water is also, there are multiple types of water rights. And in Colorado, the two easiest ones to think of are surface water and groundwater. So think ditch rights and streams and creeks and snowmelt. That's surface water. It comes down from the clouds. It's free, kind of, not really. And then there's groundwater, meaning you sink a well into the ground and you pump it up and you put it on your crops, you feed your cattle, you put it through your house, flush your toilets, whatever. The other two types of water rights that are traditionally traded are very specific. There are municipal credits, which are essentially tap credits. Basically, somebody in the past has taken a raw water resource, like a ditch right, and dedicated it to the municipality and said, okay, I'm giving you X acre feet of water. You're going to give me X number of taps per houses based on how much water I'm giving you. And so in theory, that you're transitioning that water right from a renewable surface water right that's quantified based on how much water comes down the ditch or down the creek to how much water is in the municipal system, and they are guaranteeing that they will serve you. So there are municipal credits, there are surface and stream rights, there's groundwater, and I'm blanking on the last one all of a sudden. There's augmentation credits, another kind of paper water is a good way to think of it. And an augmentation credit is basically a scenario where you are more often than not punching a hole in the ground with a well and you're pulling water out of the creek. And what it does is it creates a hole in the creek and you have to replace that with something, whether it's from the exact same spot where you pulled the water or downstream or upstream, some variation of that. About to go down 7 different rabbit holes there. That's the fun with water is everything is a rabbit hole. I could talk for an hour on every concept. So I'm doing my best not to do that, but it's a fascinating, wild world.
Yeah, there's a lot there, Sean, so I'd love to unpack a couple things there, and, to try and do this coherently, we'll touch on the ownership thing in 1 second because I see land listings all the time that say, "Hey, this land comes with XYZ water rights," right? So we'll hit on that 1 second, but one just really tactical question I wanna understand and I think is important for our listeners. Just for the sake of conversation, let's say I own 100 acres with X prior appropriation, right, from however many years ago, and maybe I even said that wrong, and I wanna sell you my water. Is it a conceptual thing where I can sell you those water rights and then I can't use the wells, I can't pump that anymore, and then you can? Or is it a physical constraint where, "No, I have to pump that water from my land to wherever you want it?"
Great question, and it's gray. It's a gray area. Could be yes, could be no. Let's assume that the 100 acres you've got doesn't have any surface water, and I'll go through both scenarios, and I'll try to keep it concise. So scenario 1, you have groundwater only beneath your property. Let's say your property is in Douglas County, Colorado. Well, underneath most of the property in Douglas County, Colorado are aquifers, the Dawson, the Denver, the Arapahoe, the Fox Laramie, and so far and so forth, further down. With groundwater, you are able to sell it. Technically, with groundwater, it's separate from the prior appropriation system. And with groundwater, it's whatever is underneath your property to the center of the earth, you own that, just like oil and gas. So with groundwater, you have to pump it out of the ground to sell it. Or you have to be the adjacent property owner and own it to be able to pump it out of the ground. So for example, the 2 scenarios that I hear all the time are, I own this acreage, I want to sell my groundwater, I'm not doing anything with it, I don't have a well, how do I get it to sell? How do I sell it? Well, the easiest solution there is you go to your direct neighbor, hopefully they're a municipality with a commercial size pump, and because their property is contiguous or adjacent, they can pump that water up and you don't have to drill a well. Otherwise, you have to drill a well and pump it up, put it in trucks, put it in tanks, put it in a pipeline, something like that. So that's kind of the scenario with groundwater. With surface water, you can move that water wherever. In a lot of cases, that water actually, here's what's wild about water in Colorado. 80% of the water in Colorado falls on the western slope. So westwards, Grand Junction. It goes into the Colorado River, goes all the way down through a bunch of different states and goes into Mexico, into the Pacific Ocean. Well, the majority of the water in Colorado on the eastern slope is actually Colorado River water. They have drilled a bunch of holes in the mountains in the Continental Divide, and they're pumping water from the west to the east. Those are called transbasin sources. So things like CBT shares, Colorado Big Thompson units is the name of the project. Or if you're down in the Arkansas Basin, it's the Twin Lakes shares. And so if you think about that, you can own water rights that technically the rain falls on 1,000 miles away, maybe 1,000 is too far, 100 miles away. It never physically touches the property you own, but you own those water rights. And if you move the water through different trade transactions and paper exchanges and pipelines or whatever, you could move that water wherever you want. So the true answer to your question is it depends on whether it's groundwater or surface water.
But even in that example, they still had to drill those pipelines through the mountain to get it from the Colorado Basin to the west or eastern slope, right? It's not because there's some credits, like a lot of green energy credits, right? You can just buy and sell those. They're a conceptual thing. It's not that way with water, correct? At all.
Very true. There is a physical nature to water, whether it's groundwater or surface water. Absolutely. You've got to have a use, a beneficial use. You've got to have a location, and you have to cover quality as well. Water quality is, I'm not an engineer, so I'll be light on that, but that is one of the components of water rights to think about.
Okay. That's very helpful. So with that clarified, I've got to also clarify the ownership thing. So I look at all these land listings. They talk about the water rights that are owned or that come with the property. You see mention of them in the deed. So how does somebody own them, or how does it work? Basically, if people can't own them, if they're publicly owned, are these listings just inaccurate, or how does that work?
Ooh, I love the technicality, as I put my foot in my mouth. No, the fun of it is, even if you own it, it's still a right of the people. And so with water in Colorado, there's this concept of if you don't use it, you lose it, which is wild. So I'm going to put this in the context of a farm. So with water rights in Colorado, say you're growing alfalfa and you've been growing alfalfa with your water rights for 100 years. You're the fifth generation of the farm owner, whatever. Well, let's say all of a sudden you stopped using your water rights. Grandpa dies and you don't know how to work the pumps and nobody planted for 10 years or whatever the reason may be. Those water rights start to lose value. Not just value, but eventually the water commissioners, there's a whole water court process that's separate of our other legal judicial process that's focused only on water. Eventually, somebody will make an abandonment claim saying, hey, John Smith up at XYZ farm, 2 diversions up, isn't using his water. Well, he must have abandoned it. He hasn't used it in 10 years. Eventually, if he doesn't dispute that abandonment claim, he will lose that right, and the ditch company will take his shares back, or the water commissioner will say, yeah, your water rights are no longer valid. You didn't use them. Now, I'm obviously oversimplifying, and there's a whole water law practice that specializes in all of this. So by no means am I trying to be an engineer or a lawyer. I'm a broker. It's my job to be a salesman, get in the middle, and you know, convince people to buy and sell or manage a process more often than not. I'm not out there, stealing farms and, selling the water off of them. I wait for phone calls and I help is essentially the way I shake at it. So
Makes sense. I've been trying to buy a piece of land for a while just east of Colorado Springs, and the guy keeps telling me, the broker on the property, that there's 2,400 acre feet allocated, but we've only been using 200. If you get the usage up, then you can go and apply to have these converted to domestic use, and then do a whole bunch of lots. And from my understanding, the time frame is quite long, like 10 plus years. We'd have to use it at that higher rate to then get the higher historical usage to then convert all that into domestic water. So
yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. There's kind of a 10-year look as far as use to validate seniority, things like that. And then, touching on the overall process of converting water, because water is developable just like land. And with land, you have entitlements. You've got your land use codes, your zoning uses, your setback requirements, all that kind of stuff. With water, there's a similar concept, and you can develop water rights. There is a water court process that I alluded to a second ago. It can take years to get through. And the other crazy part about the water court process is it's the exact opposite of what you would think. You have to prove non-injury when you're changing your water rights, which is the exact opposite of our normal judicial system, which is you're innocent until proven guilty. With water, they're basically saying, hey, if you want to move that water, you're hurting me. My crops are dying. Prove to me that when you move that water out of the ditch that it doesn't injure me. And it's on the person that is applying to change the water rights. It's on them to prove that they're not harming financially, physically, whatever, environmentally, anybody that's downstream or upstream or down ditch or up ditch. So it's, I keep saying fascinating, and it's a rabbit hole. It's been interesting. I have yet to take anything physically through water court myself as part of a transaction. I have been fortunate enough to avoid that, but also I'm a little upset because I would learn through that process and I find it fascinating. I do have one set of rights that we are selling a farm to a county. I'll leave the details outside of that, but I will get to take that water through court, which will be really, really interesting. And they are not necessarily converting it to a domestic use. What we typically see is a farm is run by mom and pop, grandma and grandpa, whatever. They either want to retire or they pass away, and the children, which are actually probably in their 50s, because everybody's living to be older, they don't want to have anything to do with the farm. And the grandkids, don't either, or they don't know how to do anything with a farm because we seem to have lost the ability to grow stuff in our society. So in that circumstance, what we find is we call them the lost generation of farmers, the lost and the last. Um, the only value they have, the only retirement they have is the value of their land. And in Colorado, sounds like you figured this out. Land without water, in my opinion, has a zero, if not near zero value. I mean, everything has value. Nothing is worth nothing. But without water, how do you grow stuff? How do you flush a toilet? How do you build something, do a manufacturing process, whatever? So we typically find that there are uneducated agricultural communities that have aging members that have very senior water rights that the municipalities would love, and they don't know what to do. They're kind of in a stuck position because they don't know, and they don't have anybody to take over from them. So it's interesting.
Creates a lot of opportunity for, everyone, if you can figure it out. But what on the development side, we hear about it all the time in Colorado that, we're not going to annex this huge project into the city because we don't have enough water to support it. Where have those developers gone wrong?
That's a good question. I think that there's a societal trend to blame developers when things don't either work out easily for them or for the community on the back end, or the houses don't look good or whatever. It's always the developer's fault. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I say that because I'm also part-time developer and have in the past. So I wear a million hats and I play middleman, which is my job as a broker. But with water development, there's a couple different ways to skin the cat. And unfortunately, in some geographical physical locations of Colorado and some other Mountain West states, there's no options. There's no water. It's either been sold or it never existed. And really, we probably shouldn't have been farming that land to begin with, ever. But we did as a society, and now we are where we are today. But so honestly, I have to have some hard discussions sometimes of, hey, Sally Joe, I know Grandpa left you the farm, but he sold the water, or he's pumping water out of the ground and there's no infrastructure for miles. Sometimes water is worth nothing, which is crazy to say, or so little that it would take millions to get it to where you need to get it to, thereby defeating the value. Um, but what I find is as part of that diligence process that I mentioned earlier, call your water broker, is think about the options. You identified a location that is very water scarce, the Arkansas Basin or Colorado Springs, Pueblo, all the way down Rocky Ford, all the way to the Kansas border. Water is scarce. Water is hard. Water is over appropriated, fully allocated. That river would run dry if we let it. It would be, think about a million straws in a river. They would all disappear. So there are problem areas that have created conflict. You've heard of the term water wars. It's not easy. But let's shift to a better location to talk about some other concepts, just because I think it would be helpful for your viewers. Let's assume we're in northern Colorado for a moment. There are more ditch systems up in northern Colorado. There are more there's more transbasin water that's coming through from the west to the east. There is groundwater up there as well, but there seems to be slightly less over appropriation, overuse of the river. So for example, when I say overuse of the river, in northern Colorado, in the Platte, the South Platte very specifically, there is a concept period of time early in spring where it's called the free river, meaning there are less people calling their water rights out to be used or physically pulling water off the river than there is water in the river. So there's a portion of water that's free for anybody to use. And a lot of times what happened is former gravel pits will fill their gravel pits during the free river time period, and then they sell that water to oil and gas users that basically come in with a truck and a pump and, fill their truck, and then they go frack with it or something. Down in the Arkansas, there is no free river. The Colorado River, pretty confident there's no free river anymore. Arizona and Phoenix and, oh man, yeah, there's been, sorry, I shouldn't be bashing other states, but yeah, So in northern Colorado, where I'm going with this is, and I got a little sidetracked because water is wild. There are options. So if you're trying to develop a piece of property, depending upon where it is, there are more than 400 ditches in the state of Colorado. There are more than 100 water municipalities, water utilities, water districts, water conservation districts. They're all called Title 32 districts. They're essentially metro districts for the developers that are listening. Um, Basically, what I would recommend is figure out what you want to build and then figure out where it is most financially appropriate to obtain the water, because there's more land without water than there is water without land in Colorado. So you should be able to find a land parcel that has no water on it, assuming that you're close enough to a service provider to then get served. There are options up there, and different service providers provide different amounts of water at different prices. Some of them will also tell you, go find us water and give it to us, and then we will serve you. Some of those same providers will say, if you bring me 1 unit of CBT, I will serve 75% of the actual water that gets delivered to us. We get to keep the other 25. Some municipalities will say, we'll give you 50% of the water that we get served. So just because you have water rights or you found a utility provider doesn't mean that's the best scenario you should be in. And you can negotiate with them as well. That's the other scenario. So it's definitely a case of doing your diligence. I keep coming back to diligence, just like zoning. You can't buy property and just put up a multifamily skyrise on it just because you want to. You have to have the appropriate approval.
No, I mean, all great points right there. I think that, I mean, there's a lot of projects where the due diligence is going to kill it, quicker than anything. And it's really important to develop, to figure out the water whenever you need to. And there's a reason, which we won't talk about on the show, that I pretty much only do, and Dan, for the most part, same, of exempt developments where you don't have to worry about all this stuff. But do you have, because we're talking about Colorado, which is relevant since that's where, you and I both live, where we both do, a bunch of business and everything. But water, it seems like it's regulated at the state level, not the federal level. Is that
That
correct?
is true. State and local, even further. So it goes down. It's home rule state. So local municipalities have control. But yes, it doesn't go federal. So the top is the state. Yes.
So are you aware of kind of like the water rights laws in other states? Like, are there, like Texas or something like that versus California versus New York versus Colorado, where it's very, very easy? Or are there states where there's no water rights?
Best way I can answer that question is there's really only two types of state rights or state approaches. There's the prior appropriation, which is whoever was first to use it, which is what Colorado does, which is what a lot of the western arid United States does. Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and California. Some variation of prior appropriation. And each of those states is a little bit different nuanced. Colorado, I would say, has, from my understanding, the most complex precedent in court kind of process set. California might be number two. I have not taken my water business outside of Colorado just because of the legal complexity with it. I figured I'd learn Colorado first and see where that got me. But the other states, so call it east of the 38th meridian, something like that, essentially they have a different system. And I'm blanking on the Latin phrase, but it's basically, if the water is on your property, it's yours. So say, for example, you own a piece of property and a river runs through it. Well, you own that river on top of your property. Or if you own property next to a river, you have access to it and can fish in it. You could pump it out. You could do whatever. You could dump chemicals into it. Historically, that's what the industrial folks were doing. But in Colorado, just because a river runs through your property does not mean you can touch that water. Yes, you can physically walk through it, whatever, but you can't take it. You can't pull it off. So that's kind of the big difference. In Colorado, first to use it, it's yours. Further east, it's whoever physically owns the land. So those are the two main differences. And I wish I could think of the Latin phrase for the other one at the moment, but it'll come to me.
Makes sense. So, Sean, you mentioned the Arkansas River, and I've done a lot of business in Pueblo West. And I'm not sure how familiar you are with Pueblo West, the Metro District, the history there, but in 22 they shut down all their water taps with no warning because turns out they weren't managing them very well and they were running out, right? And so since then, they've opened back up. They've increased the price now multiple times. They did it again January 1st. There's only a certain amount of taps left. Since the rates went up, market slowed down. They're going through them much more slowly, but it's still uncertain. I wonder in 3, 4, 5 years, or if we have another building boom, are they going to run out and essentially make all the land within the municipality worthless, or will they acquire more rights? So what's your opinion? What do you think the Metro District's doing? And do you think a small entity like that has any chance of securing more water?
Great question. I am very familiar with Pueblo West. What I can tell you is I have been hunting for water rights to dedicate to Pueblo West for over a year. Very specifically to support a developer that wanted to build a retail project. I won't name names further than that, but the scenario was exactly as we described. The developer came in and said, "I want to build X, Y, and Z." Pueblo West said, "Great. We don't have enough water for that. Go get us some. Bring it to us and dedicate it, and we'll serve you." And as I said, the Arkansas Basin is over appropriated, fully allocated. There's nothing that hasn't been claimed by 3 people, which that's not the best way to say that legally, but that's the concept of it. So not trying to pick on Pueblo West. They are not unique. They are not alone. Almost every single municipality in Colorado is in a scenario where they are in need of buying water. Depending upon where you are, the need might be different. So Pueblo West, a lot of El Paso County and Douglas County predominantly was developed on groundwater. So all of these municipalities, Castle Rock, Parker, Monument, they allowed developers to just sink holes in the ground with wells and build whatever they wanted. Now, fast forward to the 80s and 90s, 1990s. I know we're in the 2000s now, but 30 years ago, the municipalities realized, oh, wait a minute, these aquifers aren't infinite. We need to figure something out, and so they're doing 2 things. And Pueblo West is doing this as well. Basically, they're saying we can't grow, we can't issue more building permits unless the developer brings us water. So they have gotten smarter, to their credit. The municipalities have figured out that they were in themselves a self-made trap, and they had to change their strategy. So they have been basically limited in their growth ability based on how much water supply they have. So they require developers to go get it. They want to grow. The municipalities always want to grow. That's always the goal. At least every municipality I've ever met. So they need more water to do it. And if they're trying to grow, they either require developers to get it, or they themselves do have buy initiatives. They go out and buy water direct, the municipalities. I have several clients that are actually municipalities. One's a county, where they have engaged us, HydroSource Inc., to go out and find water supplies. The other reason municipalities are out buying water is they're trying to diversify their portfolios. They have too much groundwater, and they're worried they're going to suck the aquifer dry. And so they're trying to go out and buy surface water, which is what Pueblo West is doing. What Pueblo West is doing, very specifically, they told us, we want Twin Lakes Canal Company shares to be able to issue building permits for your developer client. We need more water. And Twin Lakes shares are Colorado River water, which is crazy to me. So the Colorado River, it's in the news. It's all over the place because they're renegotiating it state by state, who's allowed to use how much. And what's wild is the Twin Lakes shares are actually really junior, even though they're from a hole in the mountain that somebody drilled, 50 years ago. It was actually John F. Kennedy that in 1962, I'm pretty confident of that, approved the Frying Pan, Arkansas project, which is a big hole in the mountain that pulls Colorado River water into the top of the headwaters of Twin Lakes and then down into the Arkansas, which is the same as the Colorado Big Thompson project in northern Colorado. So Pueblo West, to their credit, understands that they can't just give out a million taps. And it sounds like a few years back, they learned that the hard way. That was before I was in the water industry. So I was not around for that horrificness. That sounds horrible, especially if you're a homeowner. Um, to their credit and other municipalities, they're trying. They realize they have a problem and they're trying to fix it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. On my end, I'm very bullish on the buy and hold there. I have a bunch of rentals and working on building some more. And it's like, okay, they're almost out of water taps. If they get more, it's going to cost a lot of money. So all that's going to lead to is constraints on supply, increased costs on bringing on new supply, and that'll help push prices up in time. But to not be so specific, let's go bigger picture again. All this conversation, you mentioned pretty much every municipality wants more water. I know Pueblo, the city itself, is doing pretty good, but most of the municipalities need more water. Are you at all concerned that within our time horizons, the state will reconsider the 35-acre exemption for domestic wells? Do you think that could change?
Ooh, that is a good question. Yes, I am concerned that that could happen. Do I believe that it will? No, I don't. And I say that because there's too much land outside of the municipal infrastructure that exists today that's too far. And without being able to put a well in the ground for whatever reason, whether it's your house or your farm, you want to run a pivot, whatever it may be, groundwater has value. I was sitting through a water commission meeting for Douglas County earlier this week, and I heard the stat that there is something like 250 million acre feet of estimated quantity in the aquifers, the Denver Basin aquifers. Now, don't hold me to that 250 million acre feet because that sounds like, oh, it's our solution. Well, that's what they thought in the 80s. And then all of a sudden, wells were starting to go dry at 50 feet deep. I sit in northern Douglas County, unincorporated. I have a well. It's down 680 feet. And I'm not excited to re-drill that if it goes dry. That sounds expensive as hell. So to get back to your question, the 35 acre exempt, which basically means if your property is 35 acres or bigger, you don't have to apply for all this special permitting to drill a well, assuming it's for one house and, one stock tank or some limited use, basically, is the simplest way to think about that. If the state basically came out tomorrow and said, no more 35 exempt acre parcel wells, to me, that means like 80% of Colorado is now undevelopable. And how do you subdivide anything? That just kills growth to me. That's my theory. So I don't A, want that to ever happen, or B, hope that it does.
Well, governments love killing growth, so
Well, yeah, they don't always listen to us little people, but
That's always a fear with anything that we're doing, that the government can come in and, change things up. But Sean, as we move towards the end of the show, because we've gotten technical, we've gotten high level, and we've been very specific with, the state of Colorado. What can you leave our listeners with of what do they need to know? Because most of them are in the land space, whether they're doing, exempt subdivisions or minor subdivides or major subdivisions, or they're just, building one house or two houses at a time. If you could leave them with like one gold nugget of advice related to water brokers, and water rights, what would it be?
other than call your broker being me, my piece of advice would be ask all the questions. Similar to what you would ask if you were buying property to just thinking about the land. Ask the questions. Are there any water rights? Use your eyes. If you're sounds like you guys are out buying large swaths of raw land, if I understand your business. Do a drive. Are there crops? Is there a pivot? Is there a ditch that runs through the property? Do your diligence. Water is crucial, and it's a significant dollar impact to your budget. If you think your land has water, you better double check. Ask the question. The other piece of information it's worthwhile knowing is water rights. There is no title insurance for water rights. There is no chain of title that you can go to First American, Chicago Title, Land Title, whatever. You can't go to a title company and say, can you tell me if this land has water on it? That doesn't exist. So water rights are complex. That's why part of your diligence process should be water related, whether it's calling a professional or asking your engineer or asking the homeowner. Super important. It could kill your deal. Absolutely. Or you could find a diamond in the rough and it could double the profit of your project. So water is important.
And if they don't have a water broker because there's so few of you, do you recommend, have the water attorney, take a look at it? Because if you're not seeing it on the title commitment and you can't just research it online and there's no water brokers in the area.
Water rights attorneys, there's a lot of them. They are very knowledgeable. They will be able to tell you pretty quickly, and should, if there's water attached to the land or not, at a bare minimum. Now, they may not always understand the value of that water. That's where you really need somebody that trades it, a broker. Same as land. Land use attorneys don't know values. Some of them do, but not always. So it's important to just figure out if it even exists. Step one. Step two, what is it? How much is it worth? And can I use it for whatever I want to use it for? That's what's really important. Just because you have a water right doesn't mean you can water crops. Doesn't mean that you can put it into a domestic house, run it to a building. It might, but it also might not. So it's always worth doing diligence. I keep coming back to diligence. I feel like a school teacher sometimes.
No, I think you're right on, because there's certain types of wells where you cannot have a faucet outside of your home. And then there's domestic wells where you can have 2 residences and irrigate up to an acre. So really understand the laws, reach out to people like Sean if you're in Colorado, or if you're in another state. Just make sure you understand the laws before you make a very, very expensive mistake. But Sean, where can people find out more about you?
You can find me at Hydrosource Inc. or hydrosource.net, and it's spelled exactly as it sounds. It's the most creative water broker firm name ever, Hydrosource. You can always find me on LinkedIn as well. I do a fair amount of interaction on there and business driving. So happy to help anybody that needs some help. And I spend a good chunk of my time just trying to solve problems. So happy to help.
Awesome. Sean, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show. This was a ton of fun. This is Sean Flanagan with Dan Havercost and Mason McDonald, and on the Big Picture Blueprint, signing off.
Thanks, everyone.